There are other airlines which fly in, but Lord, we'll see them at 2 minutes past 3 a.m.
Same thing happens in Dubai, actually.
Same as Dubai. South Africa used to be the same.
Welcome to the So Here's Something Interesting podcast, a platform for the curious collective change makers. Here, we're always going to be striving to make knowledge cool and easy to consume. Some might even call us knowledge nerds. I hope not. Today, we've got legendary Thebe Ikalafeng, a marketer who has done it all, and he graces us with his presence. Thebe is recognized as an inspirational, engaging African who's also insightful and is seen as an authority on building brands and reputations across Africa and the world. He's gone from heading up Nike in Africa to literally scaling the heights and summiting Kilimanjaro. He is now, as of last month, a holder of not one, but two honorary doctorates for his contributions to the marketing industry, branding, and the continent. He's been to every single inch of Africa. No, literally. He's been to every single African country. And he joins us today to talk about nation branding and branding as a whole on the African continent. Uncle T, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Master Masa.
What an intro. Don't you ever feel weird when people like talk about your accomplishments and all the things you've achieved?
Well, they're not talking about me. They're talking about the work. So
you let the work speak for itself.
Let the work speak for itself. No, it's obviously humbling when you reflect on what you've done without, because we don't do these things for the honors. We do them honorably, and we see it as work, as a mission. So whenever people read out all these things, I always say, who are they talking about?
Let the work speak for itself. Yeah. That's amazing. So maybe take us a little bit back. Who is Thebe, and how does Thebe arrive here with all of these accolades? Just quickly. I mean, I know it's many years, but it's many years, but
more than 50 of them, right?
Truncated.
Now, born and raised in Kimberley, came to South Africa, to Joburg.
Well, it was South Africa back then.
It was South Africa back then, right? From Kimberley to Joburg. I came to Joburg and dropped out of WITS and then moved to the US. I dropped out of accounting actually at the WITS. And I moved to the US. And my first week or so when I arrived in the US, I met some friends that I knew in South Africa, now moved to the US. And Sibuso Kharebe says to me, "What are you coming to do here?" I was like, "I'm coming to finish my accounting degree, dog." It's like accounting. It's like, but Thebe, you're not an accountant, you're a marketer. So literally you can almost say that that was the beginning of how I transitioned from accounting to marketing. Because I started my first year at varsity. Because remember that I already had 2-3 years of accounting. Yeah. And I thought I was just going to do a year or two, then I come back home. And he says to me, relax.
Chillax.
In a different country. Follow your passions, follow your instinct, follow who you are, and then go back home complete.
Brilliant.
And I literally started front row accounting, last row marketing. By the end of the semester or the end of the my term there, I was front row marketing and last row accounting. And I was named American Marketing Association Student of the Year.
Brilliant.
I don't know. I was also a bit confused when they called me, and they said to me, I remember Professor Richardson meets me on the stairs of David Strass. I was coming down the stairs, and he was going up, and he stopped and says, "Thebe, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the weekend." I'm like, "Oh, what's happening, Prof?" It's like at the awards. I said, "Oh, those ones, I'll see you there." And he says to me, "You're going to make such a brilliant marketer in your career." I was like, he has been smoking something. But anyway,
that was your Nostradamus moment, but the correct predictions.
But it was interesting. No, but it was just an interesting moment for somebody to say that, who's just given me 2 classes in marketing. And then, of course, I started my career at Colgate in New York, and then came to South Africa, Sun International, Nike, and then I started then left Nike after 6 years. I had the shortest corporate career of anybody I know, because I became a marketing director after working for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And a lot of people work for 25 years to become marketing director. I worked only 2.5 years. And I was put into this position with people who were much older than me, more experienced than me, smarter than me. And I had
smarter than you?
I think they were all smarter than me. And I had to work twice as hard to be smarter than them at the end. Because now they all work for me, and now they need to respect me, right? So I now needed to put in the work to earn the respect. Literally, that's how it started. And then left that after 6 years and started brand leadership.
Brilliant. That's amazing. And that's where a lot of the work that you do in terms of reputation management, nation branding takes place. Now, for anybody who is listening to this podcast as well as watching, I want you to maybe paint a picture, a very simplistic picture about what nation branding actually is. What is nation branding and why does it matter?
Well, it matters because every country competes for a share of the wallet. Every country competes for a share of tourism. Every country competes for a share of investment, trade investment, and every country competes for a share of citizenship.
Yeah.
So now if you look at everybody wants to move to, the accountants want to move to Canada or to Australia, South Africa as an example.
Yeah.
And the doctors as well want to move to those countries.
Yeah.
If you look at people want to emigrate to other countries, it's competing for talent.
So it's
because the competition for talent, if you get off of Hillbrow Airport right today, you'll see billboards on the airport already. And they're already saying if you've got a qualification in IT, in technology,
there's
in
a place
AI,
where you're here.
There's a place where you're here, we'll give you citizenship, apply.
Yeah.
So that's what nation branding is about. Nation branding is really about formulating, shaping the image and identity of your country to be able to compete for talent, to be able to compete for investment, and to be able to compete for tourism.
Let's talk about nation branding across the continent. Where, if we had to put a dipstick down, where are we finding that nation branding, I'd say African collective nation branding, where is it? And where should it be and how can we get there, as well as looking at what are the key markers for a nation brand that's doing really well?
So if you look at it collectively, you have to go back to 1963 on the 24th of May when Kwame Nkrumah and about 30 other presidents addressed 30 presidents, and he laid down a blueprint of what it's going to take for a now newly quote-unquote independent Africa to really be competitive in the world.
Yeah.
And he said we need to have a common citizenship, we need to have a common currency, we need to have a common communication system, we need to have a common system of defense. So he laid out a blueprint of what it will take to shape the image and the identity of Africa. Because that's why he always said, we look near the east, near the west, we face forward as Africans. And this is how we're going to face forward. So he was laying out the collective African brand blueprint, which, of course, over the years, we have in many ways not delivered on that. But there are pockets of excellence in many places in around the continent. Now, if you look at a country like Rwanda, for example, which in 94, remember, underwent catastrophic, terrible genocide. But that country today has reshaped its image and its position. They've positioned themselves as the tech capital, the meetings capital of Africa. All the important decisions about the continent, the idea of an African passport, the idea of Africa Free Trade Continental of CETA, were all decided all concluded in Rwanda, because Rwanda's positioned itself as the meeting place of Africa, where important decisions about the continent take place, and also setting up as a tech hub of the continent. So that's just one example of a country. Like now you come to South Africa. South Africa has traditionally been seen as from a tourism perspective as a place which offers the most diverse tourism product. But also from a financial services, we've always been the leader in banking and financial services broadly. I mean, that's why, for example, even recently, South Africa was named the number one, South Africa's accounting a degree or accounting profession was named the highest in the world, one in the world most recently, because South Africa has always led in that space. So countries, so different countries compete for different things. I mean, look at Egypt has positioned itself as the historical capital of the continent, as the civilization capital.
Yes.
You know, they said this is where it started. This is where it started. This is where paper started. Papyrus, which we now use for money and for everything else. They say this mathematics started. They also say that this is the place where the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, which I've summited a few years ago.
Oh wow!
Well, I was looking for the.
Where have you not summited?
Everest, because I think it's called Everest. I wasn't ready to rest forever, so that's I haven't been there yet. But you can see how, and also remember now. Positioning yourself as a country or competing or defining your nation brand, you can't just do it on things that sound beautiful. You must be able to deliver on them. So the things I've said about Egypt, for example, you look at the pyramids, where the pyramid is an example of engineering and mathematical ingenuity. The papyrus, the Mount Sinai. So they can make a claim to
these things.
To these things. I mean, they've just created a $1 billion museum. Wow. Just to be able to tell the story of civilization and where Egypt fits into that. So you can go through the regions, continent, region by region, economic region. You'll find one or two countries which are really at the forefront of defining themselves in terms of what they can compete on
and what they are.
The
competitive advantage, your branding competitive advantage. Now, I want to maybe,
and I like what you said because branding is about competitive advantage.
Yes,
it is about the thing that you do different from everybody else.
And you do the best.
Gives you an advantage over others.
So in terms of South Africa, when you look at the landscape of South Africa and the key pillars that underpin who we are and how we can brand ourselves globally, where do you think the opportunities for exponential growth in our nation branding could possibly come from? Well,
a thought leader in nation branding is a guy called Simon Arnold, and he's created the hexagon or the 6 pillars of how to build a nation, how to design a nation brand. And among all those, when we look at when we do research and try to benchmark and trying to understand where we perform well, there's a couple of areas where we perform well. One of them is definitely arts and culture and heritage. So that space, because if you think about South Africa, when it comes to the fauna, the flora, we are unchallenged in that area. I mean, from the Kruger National Park,
Fynbos, all the way down.
Fynbos, the garden route,
the rooibos,
all those. So definitely that's the one area where we do very well. One of the other areas that we do very well as well is the people's sector, because people is also a pillar. And why, when people come to South Africa, they always say, "Oh, that country, the Ubuntu, the people, they are so welcoming as people." So those are the areas that we perhaps overperform. But then the areas where we can do better. We can do better in the one area called governance and immigration and all those. That's another pillar where we definitely need to do better as a country if we are going to perform, to compete internationally. But we used to do a lot well in all the 6 pillars, but we've lost a bit of traction there.
So when we look at where, I mean, you speak of governance, and obviously I immediately start to think about the elections next year. How important are the elections to nation brands, nation branding, but also confidence in a country? How important are those, and what type of tectonic shifts happen when maybe those things don't go right or they start to disjoint a nation?
I want to use an external example, then I'm going to come back. If you look at America, for example, what the Constitution of America has done to define what brand America stands for. And the people who deliver on that are everything else: the businesses, the people, the institutions. So we've always said about America that the institutions are so strong, that the brand America is so strong, until a guy called Trump arrived. And he then disrupted their thinking all of a sudden. We now got to understand that perhaps even though you got strong institutions, even though you got a strong constitution, leadership does matter. Leadership matters, because now all of a sudden we began to question brand America in the way that Donald Trump, for example, was leading a brand America. Because we always knew that in an American scenario, for example, that a leader is just a relay. It's one of the relay runners. Just picks up from one the baton
and hands it to the
next one, and the country continues. So where do elections come in? I think you got the idea already. That even when it comes to elections are the first predictor of where the country is going to go. Of where, because what the leaders do, as Napoleon once said, a leader is a dealer in hope. So what a leadership do is they indicate the direction the country is going. They indicate the focus that the country is going to is going to do. They sell a vision of the country, and so it goes from the leader to the political party and then, for example, what happens is that whatever they campaign on becomes policy. And policy becomes
the directive,
the direction and the business of the country.
Yeah.
So elections are very important. Elections are very important because they are the first indication, or they give a sense of where the country is going. That's why, for example, unfortunately, we always have people called observers into our countries, but never into theirs, unfortunately. But having said so, what they are observing or trying to do, and all these analysts and all these rating agencies and polling, all those type of people, all they're trying to do, they're trying to get an understanding of whether this brand that we are going to invest in, is it
worthwhile?
Is it a worthwhile? Is it an investable property? Whether I can bring my trade and investment into that country, or whether I can go tour into that country, or whether I can go practice my talent into that country. So elections are very important. Leadership is very important. Political parties are very important. Institutions are very important. And all those are interrelated.
Now, myself as a career marketer, not as many years as you, but as a career marketer,
we're all marketers from the day we're born.
I've always felt that there is a huge disconnect in how marketers maybe perceive brands, the country, etc., and how the general populace sees the country. I always tend to wonder, when you brand a nation, how do you bridge that divide and that disconnect between how people on the ground, the general populace, sees the nation brand and how the nation brand projects itself to a global audience?
Unfortunately, I'll use the same example again. And I have to use this example because working in Rwanda, for example, I've learned a little bit more about the country. I've learned how the people know where the country is going. Understand why the decisions are being made about the country, believe in that, and have become the champions of the country. So the disconnect happens when you leave the people behind. The disconnect happens when what you do and what you say and what you do are not aligned. So if you speak to an ordinary Rwandan, they will tell you, we support President Kagame because he's brought stability to the country. He's brought security to the country. He's got a clear vision for the country. That's why we vote for him. So there's that general understanding. For example, the disconnect with many countries become that politicians or parties, they campaign and they say, they make lots of promises about what they're going to do for the country. But when you meet the ordinary citizen, there's a disconnect because the politicians are not necessarily delivering on the promises. The only promise they deliver in is to get themselves into power.
Wow. It's actually quite telling because as you're describing this, I think of the South African situation that we find ourselves in. I believe that South Africa has got so much to offer and give its people firstly before it even goes to the rest of the world. And that's why I believe that platforms like this exist. I started this so that people could actually understand what is happening behind the numbers. And I think for me, I believe that where South Africa is going is actually, it's more important to tell the people and get them on board than actually to say to people, we're going to run 100 meters or 10 kilometers. It's just to say, guys, this is where we think we should be going, because there should be key pillars that we understand what our government is doing. And your case study actually makes a lot of sense. I want to...
And let me just help you also in terms of the different phases of South Africa. So let's come in 1919 to 94, when we're coming out of apartheid. There was a great belief in a couple of things, that we are going to implement the Freedom Charter. And the Freedom Charter is going to be the foundation of the Constitution of South Africa. The CODESA is a forum we used to harmonize the multiple interests of the country. And then we kept it all and say a better life for all. So when you say a better life for all, you are making a promise to Lomama who lives in Mkuku, in Diepsloot, and you are saying a better life for you is to move from Mkuku to a house in bricks with running water. A better life to a businessman is to create an enabling environment for you to have more opportunities to grow your business. A better life for a student is for you to get the type of quality of education that will enable you to create a better future for you. So I haven't come across a better slogan or a promise for a country than a better life for all. And I've seen them all having run elections around the continent.
Yeah.
But I think this is perhaps one of the finest one created. The challenge that we've had over the years is the inability to deliver on that promise. So, and there's a parallel in corporate. Standard Bank. Standard Bank had a beautiful promise called simpler, better, faster. And then the reason they changed it is because a lot of people were saying the banking is no simpler. It's a complicated thing, especially people in a corporate bank, in a
corporate environment.
In a corporate environment. And they also say it is no better because I can get better somewhere else. And it's no faster because I take forever to. So they say that, you know what, it sounds beautiful as a story.
Yeah.
But you're not
on delivery.
But on delivery, that's where you come unstuck. So we come up with these beautiful slogans, even for countries. But we forget that slogan becomes what becomes an imprint in my mind.
It becomes policy.
And becomes policy, and also becomes not just policy. It becomes an expectation,
feeling,
but an expectation from the voters.
Yeah. So as you're speaking, I think about the moment, and although I'm young, I still do remember. Funny enough, it's one of those moments that sticks out in my head. Watching the State of the Nation and Thabo Mbeki delivering the "I'm an African" speech. Now, there was a time where the zeitgeist, the feeling, the aura in the nation, the texture allowed for such a poetic speech, and for South Africans to dream bigger than their confines, than our locale. Right? How do we get to a moment in time when a poetic leader will get an opportunity to deliver something like that and it hits the entire nation? Black, white, Indian, colored, it doesn't matter. What are the building blocks that we need? I know we've got the framework, but what do we need to implement immediately in South Africa to create the environment when someone says, I am an African, it then resonates the way that it did?
And it did then, if you think about it, it did then because South Africa was a thriving country. South Africa was a thriving nation. And we needed now to think beyond South Africa. We now needed to embrace our Pan-Africanism. And Mbeki understood that. Our President Mbeki understood that. He understood that, and it's probably something that Kwame Nkrumah had said many years ago, that that Africa will never ever be free unless every single African country is free. Similarly, South Africa will never ever thrive unless it is part of the greater progress of Africa. And Mbeki wanted to contextualize that. He wanted to bring us back into the bigger story. And so it worked then because the country was thriving. But then the country hit a roadblock or hit a challenges, some speed bumps. When you're hitting speed bumps, we are not looking for poetry. We are looking for performance, and we are no longer looking for you to have these beautiful sayings, because we've seen them, we've heard them in the recent ones. I mean, we've heard, for example, Tumamina when President Ramaphosa came in and he had that incredible Tumamina. We're coming out the moment we're coming out of such a difficult part of South Africa. The last 9 years or so, where it was the most challenging part with state capture, corruption, now in critical at critical levels. And when Cyril came in, and Cyril reminded us that for South Africa to come out of its malaise, come out of its problems, it's going to require every single one of us. That every single one of us, we believe that, we love that, we wanted to help him to get there. It was that poetic moment you talk about. But now the biggest test was not just the speech at the State of the Nation. The biggest test was
going out there and doing
all those things we promised.
Go out there and do it.
Have we done them? So that's where the problem comes in. Because now, when you start with a more poetic speech, people are going to say, no. It sounds beautiful on paper. Let's now do with the practicalities. What have you done with the mandate I've given you?
Do you, having traveled the continent, do you feel that the brand of South Africa is strong within the continent in the right ways? And also, what do you think the general perception of South Africans is across the continent?
It's so interesting. It depends on which type of South Africans you're talking about. So if you talk about, let's talk South Africa collectively. So South Africa collectively is still the benchmark in the continent. We're still the country that has got the infrastructure, the institutions, the freedoms that are desirable, that everybody, most people around the continent would aspire to, would wish to have for their countries. So there is no question, we still remain a country that inspires in that way. Of course, we also have some weak moments, weak spots, and soft underbellies in our country. You know, the challenges of a few years ago when we had the xenophobia, that sort of rebranded us a little bit to the rest of the continent. And I remember getting off of a plane in Ghana and in Accra, and I was giving the immigration officer my passport.
Yeah.
And then he took my passport and stopped for a moment and looked at me, and he said to me, "Why are you doing this to us?" And I was like, whoa, at that moment. And she says, "Why are you doing that to us? Why are you kicking us out like this, out of your country, after what we've done for you?" And I was like, phew. So that's how we see South Africa. So wherever you begin to go now, they begin to see, we have sort of been rebranded as a xenophobic people and an ungrateful nation for what countries like Zambia, for example, have done for South Africa. I remember me
the frontline states.
The frontline states. I mean, I had so many dinners and coffees with KK before he passed. And I remember KK saying to me, "Thebe, I sacrificed my country for your country, for your freedom." He says, my own cabinet, my parliament wanted to dethrone me because they felt that I was putting your interests above our interests. Wow. So that's that part, right? Then you have the other part, the Amapiano, the culture, the arts and culture.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the arts and culture, we are seen as the benchmark. We're seen as the people, the go-to people. The vibe. Because in that area, whether it's in design, in fashion, when it comes to music, we set the tone for the continent. We set the tone for the continent, and we are sort of we set the tone. We are the tastemakers, if you will, in that space.
So when I think about it, I think about the recent sort of exponential branding that we received as a country from winning the Rugby World Cup. What does that do for a country like South Africa? Does it move the needle when you think about our nation brand? Does it change anything fundamentally? How does it affect how people see us?
Well, there's two questions.
Yeah.
I think what it says about how people see us, they see us as a winning nation. They see us as world beaters. So because I think winning the Rugby World Cup, and for the fourth time, the first nation to do that, they see us as a country that is resilient. Because look at how it was won. It was won by 1 point, and it was mostly coming from behind, or at least certainly fighting through. So it speaks to resilience, but it also speaks to resourcefulness. Because if you look at what did we do all the time, we'll switch the teams. We'll bring from the bench. Somebody will get injured. We'll bring another one. Rassi will step down and bring in another coach. Right? So it speaks. It's very Jacques. It speaks about how South Africa is a resourceful country, but I think it also speaks about reverence. Because to me, reverence is it says you can admire that country. There's something beautiful to it.
Against all odds.
Against all odds.
They win.
This is a country I can. So to me, those 3 R's are what winning the Rugby reminds us we are capable of.
Yes.
So it says, guys, this is who you are.
We're so much
at your core. If you take that and you model that across everything else, you will become truly a nation of world beaters. So right now we beat them in some areas, but we can take that formula and apply it across. Of course, I mean, you're going to get a lot of people telling you stories about, but it's not a very transformed country. Our team is only one area and all those. But I think they are still South Africans.
Stronger together.
They are South Africans and will be stronger together, as they say. And if you take that formula and you apply it across everything else, we will be unbeatable as a country. So
South Africa is one of the key players on the continental stage, and I want for you to maybe take us through what role we play in brand Africa, one, but also what does a brand-led African agenda look like? What does that look like for the continent?
So South Africa as a key player is undisputed in the continent. notwithstanding the fact that, I mean, not undermine the fact that the leader of the Africa Free Trade Continental Area is a South African, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, who used to work for trade and investment in South Africa, and is a South African. So it means that we have, in the most critical part of the transformation of the continent, we have placed a talent in that space.
Yeah.
In 2002, the rebranding from the Organization of African Unity to the African Unity took place here in South Africa. The Pan-African Parliament is based here in South Africa. The NEPAD is based here in South Africa. So in terms of South Africa's role in the continent, South Africa is an undisputed role. South Africa has invested tremendously in the African Renaissance agenda, certainly. So there may be issues about how we are seen and how, but there's no question in terms of South Africa's commitment and investment in that space. But and you're asking the question about what does a brand-led African agenda look like? Well, I mean, what I've learned over the last 13 or so years, when I started Brand Africa 100, which is Africa's most admired brands, Africa's best brands, I've learned if I summarize, if I look at the averages over the last 10, 13 years, that only 20% of the brands that Africans admire are made in Africa. So that means 80% of our brands that we admire are external. So there's a crude way of looking at it. The crude way of looking at it is 80% of the money that is spent on brands is external. It's leaving the shores. It doesn't quite work, but it's the crudest way to look at it. So what that means, it means that 80% of the money that could be used to build the public roads, the roads, the education, the hospitals, everything else, to create a better society or a thriving society is externalized, because we as Africans are not investing or buying or admiring or using African brands. You know, Ali Mazrui, the great Kenyan who's late now, from Harvard, once said that Africa produces what it doesn't consume and consumes what it doesn't produce. So our challenge is, as a continent, is we need to produce and to consume made in Africa. Because when we do that, it means that we will be retaining a lot of the revenues in this country. But also building skills. It means we're building skills, we'll be building knowledge, we'll be building industries. I mean, how do you explain that 60 years later, after the formation of the OAU and the predecessor to the AU, that we are still one of the least industrialized continents in the world? How do you explain? It's inexplicable. The fact that we import everything that we want to consume and export everything that can create the things we want. And that's why you have to admire a nation brand like Botswana. Because a nation brand like Botswana, remember the recent challenges that they faced with the beers. When during the negotiations for better sales. Share of the diamond. The share of the diamond sales. And where the president stood his ground. And he said, we ought to get a bigger share of what is sold from Botswana. And the beer says, we own the markets internationally. And the president says, but we own the diamonds. So we're going to have to meet each other somewhere. Somehow. He says, otherwise, we will create our own markets. Are you with me? So what you need is, so a brand-led agenda is one that says, we know what makes America great. It is Microsoft. It is Facebook. It is Ford. It is the brands. Because the brands of America, the brands of UK, the brands of France, the brands of Germany, they conquer global minds. There's what have been used to change the perceptions and the image of those countries. So a brand-led agenda for Africa will enable us to change the perceptions and the image of the continent. And the only way we're going to do that is if we truly control our resources. If you truly control our means of production, if you control the inputs. Right now, we are not in control. We are just an export. We export everything and we import what we export, the means, and we import the solutions. It's a problem for the continent.
It's a massive problem. And I think for any young person who's listening to this podcast or watching it across the networks, I think it's important to understand that this very conversation is actually an uplifting one. I feel even more emboldened that we can change the trajectory of South Africa and Africa through the actions that we take, through the little bits of I'd say ingenuity, the making the choices to be somebody who is a player in your community, in your town, in your city, in your province, in your country. So when you look at where South Africa is headed, and you look at what maybe are the 3 things we need to get right, no more than that. If we just focused on these 3 things, we could get our South African brand like singing, and then we can also assist the continent to brand the entire continent as a center of excellence.
I think we need to learn from the Chinese first. We need to protect our borders. When I talk about protect our borders, I'm not talking about xenophobia and all this. I'm talking about continentally. So now think about when the Amazons of the world wanted to enter China.
Yeah.
And China said, hold up a little bit. Can we first just build up Alibaba?
Yeah.
So that Alibaba can be able to compete on equal footing. So the problem that we're having in the continent is our borders are too open. Our borders are too open. It's free for all. As a result, our own citizens do not have an opportunity to be able to build a competitive advantage. So because if I come to you with 400 years of experience and 400 years of equity, and I'm trying to compete,
I'm ahead.
I'm way ahead of you. It doesn't matter whether you have whatever you do. So we need to do what, for example, they did in Namibia. For example, they said every product that goes onto the shelf, at least 30% of it was made by indigenous Namibians. Just as a start. Yeah. As a start, so one, you have to protect the borders for stuff coming in, and to give the chance to everybody for us to be able to
protection.
It sounds like a horrible thing. Yeah. But what has it done for China? It has created a stronger China. China now is a superpower that can now stand toe-to-toe with America. Remember, it used to be made in China. Yes. Before, and made in China used to be what? Poor, Hong Kong, all those. Not anymore. No. China is now a global superpower because it understood its power. China said, we've got 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 billion people who have got skills, have got factories. Why don't I turn all those into a competitive advantage? We've got the same in Africa, but we've opened up our markets. The second thing is, once you've done all that as well, you then have to upskill us. Our education in South Africa is diabolical. Let me first finish the opening up of the borders as an example, for example, because I think there's a fundamental point there. Look at SAA. Where is SAA today? Other than the issues to do with corruption and all those, one of the other reasons SAA was so easy to decimate was because Emirates says, can I land in Cape Town? Can I land in Durban? Can I land all those? Can I land at peak hour? And it's of course. And then you ask the ministers, the government, and you say, guys, SAA is a state airline. Can you all fly SAA like they do in Ethiopia? Yeah. In Ethiopia, everybody who works for government flies Ethiopian Airways. Yeah. That's why they've got over 150 airplanes, and they're the strongest African airline and among the top 3 or 5 in the world. Because they say that you need to protect your market. You need to protect your industries. So part of protectionism is not a bad thing because you can't just land anytime and anywhere in Dubai. You can't just land anytime and anywhere. Try and land in Heathrow. The first they give you at the furthest landing runway, bay. And you have to leave at the oddest hour because they have to give the advantage to British Airways.
Yeah. Same thing happened in France. When you get in at the Charles de Gaulle Airport, the first 3-4 terminals are Air France. You walk in right there, and it's right there, and it's convenient. Same thing with KLM in Netherlands.
Not us here.
Not us.
Us here we say, oh, you want to fly into Cape Town? We should say, unless you're a domestic airline, you cannot fly into a domestic area. You have to fly into the main hub, and that's your end point. And you must fly in at 3 minutes past 4 in the morning, at the most inconvenient. Have you been to Ethiopian airport and watch that runway? It's a marvel. It's all Ethiopian. There are other airlines which fly in, but Lord, we'll see them at 2 minutes past 3 a.m.
Same thing happens in Dubai, actually.
Same as Dubai. South Africa used to be the same when SA was strong.
I remember.
It was the most beautiful.
My first flight ever was from East London to Joburg as an unaccompanied minor in 98.
Right?
Yeah.
So to me, I think the protectionism is an important thing. It's a benevolent protectionism.
Yeah.
Whatever that
There's a reason to the protectionism.
There's a reason.
It's not willy-nilly.
No, we are not protecting just because we are playing difficult. We are saying that we need to be competitive, and you need to create an environment for your own industries to thrive. The second thing, I think it's a skills thing. I think we can all agree. It's a horrible thing to admit that perhaps some of the kids educated under apartheid are better educated than the kids educated under the new South Africa. It's a horrible thing to say, because most of us are apartheid educated kids, but we can read and understand better than the kids who are now educated now. Because when they looked at the kids who are finishing school now, most of them cannot read to understand. They can open the book, but they have no clue what's written there. But they can read it, and they've got beautiful accents because they go to good schools. But they don't understand what's written.
Comprehension.
So comprehension is terrible. So, in matter of fact, they are not even ready for the world of work even when they finish varsity. So we need to fix the education, because if your education is at such a bad state, it means doesn't matter how you protect the industries, you don't have the skills to be able to
fill in those opportunities you are creating.
To fill in the opportunities that you are creating. So to me, that's the second and most important thing that we need to do as a country, just to fix those skills. And then those are probably a couple of things that come to mind, top of mind, in terms of what we really need to do to fix this country. And of course, what we need to do as well for this country is we need a government that works for the people. Because, the government is supposed to create an enabling environment for a thriving society. So you are not going to be able to thrive if you've got no electricity, if there's potholes everywhere else, if the systems are not working. So you need a government that creates. Because we don't need government to create brands for us. We don't need government to create hospitals or shops or all those things. We need just governments to ensure that when we want to turn those opportunities, that they are there to protect us. And of course, we'd also want government to protect the marginalized, because otherwise, if your capitalism can run away,
run rampant.
So of course, you need government to be there as a safeguard against the marginalized. I think in this country, we've gone way too far, because it's impossible to explain to anybody how almost 50% of the country is on dole. It's just impossible, because it means that almost 50% of the country is unproductive. But there are marginalized people within those 50%. There are people who truly need government to protect them. And of course, I think the fourth or probably most important thing is just to invest in the young entrepreneurs. I mean, imagine if a Batu, a Tepogens, a Drip, a Vaya, and all those young brands, a Makosa, and all those young brands, if they had a government that says the way the Chinese did, if they said,
even the Koreans,
if they said, of course, that's how the Samsung thrived. That's how the Apple thrived.
K-drama, even.
That's how all those things, right? So if you have a government that said, we like what Drip and Batu are doing, we are going to back them. We're going to enable them, because if three guys like that, a couple of guys like that, can create over 1,000 jobs. Imagine if we back them. Now instead of them bringing in components, because when they bring in components
to put them together,
put them together and sell. Now let us help them build factories, because now factories are more jobs. There's true industrialization.
Give them factories in Vereniging. Give them a factory. Just say, you now have this factory. Use it. It's in Vereniging.
So they are all on their own. The fact that these guys were all under the age of 35,
and they've built these
things, gives you an idea of the potential that lies in this country. We don't just sing and talk well with our pianos, but we can actually produce and brand and market stuff well.
Yeah.
So imagine we can win in culture as in culture. We can win in products. We need to. That's the areas that we need to ask ourselves. How can government invest to back us up?
Uncle T, what an amazing conversation. I'm actually emboldened more. I'm always seen as a crazy optimist for South Africa, for the country, and I think when I get an opportunity to sit down with people like yourself who have walked the journey, and specifically in what we're trying to do, because I believe that a lot of things can be changed when we change mindset, but we've got to see change happening in reality in order for mindsets to change quicker. And we know this from advertising, that you can't advertise. You can't, what do they say?
You can't advertise a bad product.
And you can't slap lipstick on a pig.
On the pig, right. and that's the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah.
That we've got all these beautiful slogans and people come up with slogans and all those things and making promises. But when the rubber hits the road, things come unstuck.
But with all that said, thank you so much for your expertise, for your knowledge, for your decades experience in terms of marketing, nation branding, and helping brands across the continent and helping us figure ourselves out as South Africans. I thank you so much for your time, and I hope that everybody who listens to this podcast, who watches this podcast, will have taken something very, very positive about what it is that we need to go forward and do as South Africans. So thank you for that, Uncle T.
Thank you so much. Mas, you're doing a wonderful job, and I think what you're doing is what the great Nigerian once spoke about. That says, "Until the lion learns how to tell his story, tales of the hunt will always be glorified." So what you're doing, you are helping tell the story. You are helping propagate and say that there are examples there are stories there are lessons there, and we should be in charge of our story.
Thank you so much, Uncle T.
Absolutely, thank you.
Cheers.